Let's review Yottamaster Multi-Disc RAID Dock. I'm ArtIsRight. Full disclosure, Yottamaster sent me this to do a review. All the opinions you're about to hear are solely going to be my own. Now, as the name implies, it is a multi-disc, so you can put multiple discs in there and also different kind of discs in there too. So this dock is fairly versatile. It also has RAID functionality, and the way how they implement RAID is a hardware that is built into this dock itself. So once you set the RAID up, you don't have to install any additional drivers or kernel extension that boots up with your system, especially on the Macintosh side of things. It makes it very easy to use and set up. So with that in mind, let's talk about what comes with the dock. You get the dock itself, you have the instruction manual, which is also in English, but however, I will tell you that some of the wordings can be like broken English or broken translation. There's enough of a pictogram to really help you, but if you have some baseline tech knowledge, it's going to help the setup experience to be that much smoother. Now, I would say the most important page in this manual is the dip switch for the various RAID configuration. I wish this was actually printed on the dock itself. However, it's on this page of the instruction manual. This is the one that you need to refer to in order to set the RAID, or if you want to change the RAID down the road, you're going to need to know which dip switch configuration to set that to. Now, in addition to this dock's run on an external power brick, which is something that looks like that. This is a generic power brick, and that's perfectly fine. However, I wish that Yottamaster would put their sticker on the brick itself or on the cable so that it's easier to identify even if it is being used, because if you have multiple of these devices plugged into the wall or behind your table and so forth, being able to easily identify like, hey, this cable goes into this device or is meant to be used with this device, it just makes it that much easier. Also for like long-term storage, let's say I take this out for a while, I put this in with a box of all these power adapters, trying to pair it back again without labeling them can be rather difficult. So just something to think about there. It also comes with a screwdriver. This is to mount the hard drive, SSD, and also NVMe into the dock and a caddy. The screws for SSDs and hard drive, along with this toolless design for NVMe SSD, which does not work for all the size. I'll show you that in a little bit. A SIM eject tool, or realistically, this is a reset tool for the RAID system, and also two USB cable. One of them is a longer USB-C to USB-A, right? But this USB-A, 10 gigabits per second, can also be converted to C as well. So this is a cable that you would use with a computer that does not have USB Type-C, or if you want to use with a PC, you can certainly do that as well. It also comes with a shorter braided cable. So this is a cloth woven cable, which is really neat. And this cable is actually meant to be used with a Mac Mini with the dock. Now, the original intent and design of this dock itself is to really have it used with a Mac Mini. The form factor is exactly the same size. You can see I can stack the Mac Mini on top, but ideally what they probably really want us to do is have the Mac Mini on the bottom, just like that. And when I rotate this around, you can see how the USB port are aligned, and this short cable, well, just happens to work perfectly. Just like that. Really clean, really neat. Now, what I'm going to do for my test system is use my 16-inch MacBook Pro instead, because I do not want to power up the Mac Mini and plug into the screen and so forth, but nonetheless, the idea is there. But this also shows you that you can use this dock with pretty much any other computers too. Let's start out with the front and see what this dock has. So what you have is a micro SD, an SD card reader. You have a 10 gigabits USB Type A. You have a regular USB Type A right there. That's not the super high speed one, a power button, and also a light indicator for the power and the status of the machine. Turning on to the side, there's nothing much there. Going on the other side, there's not much, but this is pretty much the back. There is a vent, and there is a fan inside there that really pulls the air out from the bottom and vent it out here in order to cool down this dock. In addition to that, there are a couple of connectors on the back. I already showed you one of them is a USB Type-C. There is the barrel connector for the power supply. You have two USB Type-A. These are just the regular slow USB Type-A. They're not marked at high speed or anything like that at all. There's a reset button, or the little reset hole right there, and this is so that you can use this pin to reset the different RAID configuration when you put in the dip switches right here. So these switches have to be in an on-off configuration and so forth in order for you to set into different RAID modes. Now, beyond that, something that's really hidden here, you can see the outline a little bit. This is a magnetic cover for an NVMe SSD slot, and this is pretty much what it looks like right there. Now, it also comes with this heat dissipator along with the thermal pad as well. I already have it installed, the thermal pad. I'm not going to pull it out because it's a little bit more difficult to pull out. But one thing that I will say is that there is a magnetic on top there, and the moment you really try to go and unscrew this NVMe SSD, it kind of just goes to that magnetic part first. That's the first thing. Secondly, when you really try to have the screw going in and out, it actually just tends to just get stuck in that corner or get pulled by the magnet. So it's a little bit more difficult to just screw in your NVMe SSD, particularly if you have the 2280, which is pretty much the long one right here. It takes other form factors as well. And what I'm going to do is actually show you behind here what you get. This way you get a chance to see what it is like. As you can see right there, my screw is already stuck on there. It's a little bit difficult. I've done this a few times, so I know how this works. But what we're going to do is pull out that NVMe SSD. So it's just pretty much the regular slot M.2, and there are different grooves that you can put in for the different sizes. This is where the toolless design that I was showing earlier So this is where this toolless design would come in, where it would just go into the dock like that, and you can just mount your NVMe SSDs. I genuinely wish that they enable the use of this toolless design for the longest one that they have as well, just because it's just really difficult to put in there with a screw. And I don't know why this particular one is the only one that you have to use it with a screw, whereas the other one can be a toolless design. So just some thoughts on that one. But otherwise, I mean, it functions just fine. A few other things to note about this as well is that when you have this set up and you plug it into your computer, oh no, I forgot to screw that in. When you have this set up and plug it into your computer, regardless of whatever RAID type and setup you have, the NVMe itself is not part of the RAID configuration. So it is a standalone device. So you can have like a higher capacity NVMe, but this just serves as a pretty much high speed, low latency device. I mean, I say high speed, it's going to be higher speed than if you would just use hard drives on the inside. So on the very top, this is just magnetic. There are 4 magnetics just holding it in place there. The magnetic is not like the strongest one, and I really wish that they would build in with a latch or something, just because if you're not careful and you pick this up like that, like this comes off, or you can see how the cover can come off. So just definitely pick this up from the side there. But on the very top, this is pretty much 2 bays for your hard drive. So right now I have 2 10 terabyte Iron Wolf drive inside there, and it just slides in like so. However, when you really do this, one of the feedbacks that I have and thought that I have is that this is a really nice caddy and bay and so forth, but you do have to put in 4 screws on the side there, 2 on each side of the hard drive. That I really wish this would be like, you know, a snap in. You know, there are many other ones out there that are just pretty much a toolless design, at least for a 3.5-inch hard drive anyway. There's also holes and patterns here. You can see that there are these 4 holes right there, as my fingers are pointing out to them right now. These holes, these are meant for SSD mounting. So these are 2.5-inch SSDs. And what I'm going to do is, after I test these hard drive, I'm going to show you the result with these SSD as well. But that is pretty much the setup for the system. Let's talk about the different type of hardware RAID that's supported on this dock. Things to be aware of. I'll show you a quick and easy way to initialize this dock for the very first time, and also some of the caveat if you need to come back and reinitialize the dock again because of a drive failure or anything like that. And lastly, we're going to do performance testing on 2 different kind of drive on all of the different RAID mode. Now for those drive, we'll be using a traditional hard drive. This is a 10 terabyte Seagate Iron Wolf, and this will get formatted on Macintosh using GUID partition table. And the file system I'll be using is Mac OS Extended Journal, or what Apple call HFS+. As far as SSD go, I'll be using a 1 terabyte Samsung 850 Pro. This is a 2.5-inch drive, and for this, I'll format this APFS. All right, so for the different RAID type that this particular dock support, it has RAID 0, RAID 1. There is a PM normal mode that in the instruction manual tries to explain it, but doesn't really do a good job. What it is just an individual disk mode. So each of these slots are just recognized as an individual disk. And lastly, there is a span and JBOD. Now, unless you have a specific reason why you want to use this in span and JBOD, I don't recommend it at all, because you're taking a lot of risk without gaining any type of benefit whatsoever. So the first time when you're using this dock, you put in a new drive, do you need to initialize it? For all these different RAID mode, you need to initialize them. The other thing that I do want to point out as well is that this dock has a slot for an NVMe SSD. This is not part of the RAID system whatsoever. The RAID system only controls these 2 drives that are pretty much installed through the top of the machine. All right, so Next question would then be, do you need to reinitialize these? Let's say if you change one of a drive, if one of a drive fails. So for RAID 0, you do need to reinitialize that, and there's a procedure and a way to do it, because you just can't, leave the dip switch the same and then press the reset button again. It's not going to work. You need to put it into a different RAID mode first, and then put it back into the RAID 0 mode. As far as RAID 1, you can just plug it in. You'll still be able to access your data and so forth. It's just that it's not going to be mirroring anymore. And the moment you put in a brand new drive to replace the one that failed, it's going to do the copying and the RAID rebuilt in the background, which means that it's going to slow down when you need to access data on those drive. In the PM normal mode, it really doesn't matter at all. You don't need to initialize it, because you can just use this as a dock, really. You plug one drive and bring another drive in and out and so forth, eject it, so forth. You can certainly do that. And in SPAN and JBOD, you do need to reinitialize that, because those are seen as one group, and the moment you break that group, it doesn't work anymore. So the next question would be, do you need both drive for it to function? In RAID 0, yes, you do need to have both of them in there. In RAID 1, you can just one with one single drive, because those are mirroring each other. The data on there is exactly the same. And provided that only just one fail, you're going to be okay. In PM normal mode, you can just run in individually, because those are all separate anyway. In SPAN and JBOD, you need both of those to be in there. As far as redundancy go, the only one that offers redundancy is RAID 1, because that is in mirror mode. Now, as far as drive capacity go, it's always ideal to use the same drive capacity, especially in RAID 0 and RAID 1. This way you get the maximum use of the capacity of each of those drive. However, if you happen to use a drive that are not similar capacity, let's say one of them is 6 terabyte, the other one's 10, the RAID system is going to choose the smallest drive as, the calculator for the RAID capacity. So in the case of RAID 0, even though you're combining a 10 and a 6 terabyte drive, ideally you're supposed to get 16, but you're not. You're only going to get 12, because the extra 4 cannot be addressed, because both drive does not have the same capacity. As far as RAID 1 go, you're only going to be able to see 6 terabyte, because only those 6 terabyte is going to mirror each other. PM normal mode, they're individual. On one drive, you'll have 10 terabyte. On the other one, you'll have 6. As far as SPAN and JBOD, this is the one where you're going to have 16 terabytes, so you'll be able to use all the space. However, the way how SPAN and JBOD work is that it fills one drive first before it fills in the second drive, and when it writes the data, it only writes it to one drive. However, if one of those drive, even if it's a drive that you don't have the data on, should fail, that SPAN and JBOD is pretty much not going to work. So that's one thing to really think about when you're really using SPAN and JBOD. Like I said, you don't even get the speed gain from having those drive together. You just take a lot of risk on in that regards. So that's pretty much drive capacity. As far as speed go, the best one you're going to get from this chart is going to be RAID 0, because that's pretty much like a SPAN thing where it divides your data in half, write one set of data to one drive, the other to the other set, and it reads write from both drives simultaneously. RAID 1, what it does is that it writes the same data and reads the same data from both of the drives, so it really doesn't do much. In fact, I think it might be doing it to one of a drive, and the other one is just like a redundancy copy. As far as PM normal go, it doesn't really matter. It's just individual drive speed, same thing as SPAN and JBOD. So hopefully that clarifies up a little bit the different RAID mode and some of the advantages and disadvantages. Now, in order for you to set this up, the first thing I would tell you is that you can plug it into your computer the way how I have now. However, you don't need to do that. It really doesn't matter whether this is plugged into a computer or not. The only thing you need to do is to install the drive on the very top and power on this particular dock before you set anything else. Now, another thing to be aware of, and this is something that I just found out, is the way how these caddies are built. They're pretty much symmetrical. This line that runs through the middle of the caddy means that you can put the drive in the opposite direction and it will fit into this caddy just fine. It's just that the drive can't really go in there because the SATA connector is only on one side. So I wish they would put like another arrow or something to denote that this is the right side, or made that a little bit more asymmetrical so that, if you put in the disc the wrong way, it wouldn't work. Obviously, you'll find out very soon that you can't really, just slide the disc in fully all the way, but another thing to note. All right. So what you want to do when you want to set up the different RAID system, initially the first time you want to choose which RAID you want to go. Let's say I want to do RAID 1. You can have the system on, by the way, and even if you initialize it, it really doesn't matter really. But what I'm simply going to do is put 2 down and 1 up. This is for RAID 1. So 2 down and 1 up. Hopefully this gets on camera just like that. And this is not initializing or anything. What I have to do next is then insert the pin into the reset portion right there and hold it for about like 3 to 5 seconds or so. You'll hear the hard drive spinning up if you're using hard drive. If you're using SSD, it doesn't do anything. But this now is fully reset and initialized and ready to go. When you plug it into the system, it's going to say uninitialized disk has been plugged into the system. Please initialize it first. Now, the thing that you need to be aware of is that in certain RAID modes, for example, RAID 0, let's say I have this set to RAID 0, one of my disks fails, and I put in a brand new disk and I'm trying to reinitialize it again. If I haven't changed these dip switch or these flip switch at all, and I press the reset button again, it's not going to work. So what you have to do is put it into a different RAID mode. Now in the manual, it recommends putting it into the individual drive mode first, which is the PM mode. So having both of these down, just like that. You can certainly do it that way. Insert the pin, reset it into that mode, and then do the initialization again. So these are just some of the little caveats to be aware of, but that's how you set the different RAID mode on this particular dock. Like I said, the cool thing about this entire dock, the way how this RAID mode is set up, is that even though you just change these dip switch, the great thing is you don't have to install any kernel extension or any drivers on a Mac or PC in order for you to use this. And the other thing too is, let's say you happens to just repress the restart button again, you haven't changed the pin position. It's not going to do anything, so there's some safeguard there. However, if you do change the pin position, let's say I do that. So this is RAID 0 and I press into the reset button there, it's going to reset this particular RAID to, or this particular dock to that particular RAID system. A couple of caveats to be aware. Now let's do some performance testing. We're going to start out with a Seagate 10 terabyte hard drive, and I'm going to do the test in all the different RAID mode. But for this first one, what I'm going to do is show you how I initialize the disk on the Mac OS. And for the following ones, what I'm simply going to do is show you the speed performance that we're getting on the different RAID mode. So right now I have this set up to RAID 0. And if I go in there right now, you can see that it's showing up as 10 terabyte. I'm simply going to come and click on erase. Just going to leave it as untitled. Because this is a hard drive, I am going to use macOS Extended Journal GUID partition table, and we're going to press erase. So it does take a quick moment for it to finish. Now that it's done, you can see that the untitled showed up on the disk or on the desktop. The other thing you'll see is that the 2 terabyte exFAT, this is my NVMe SSD, it just shows up every single time without any problems. So now what we're going to do is select the target drive, and we're going to run speed test. So this is RAID 0. And what we're getting right now is a write of around 430 megabytes per second, just about. And read, we're getting 450 megabytes per second. Now, this is using both of these two drives together in combination, so is being read from both, being written to both. And another thing to realize about this is that even though this are a 6 gigabits per second drive and it can technically read and write a little bit faster than that, the maximum sustained speed that is really listed on Seagate website for these two drives are around 180 megabytes per second. So combining these two together, we are actually getting numbers that are pretty much within range. And this is the speed for RAID 1, so it's just using an individual drive speed because it's actually being written to both at the same time and is also being read from both at the same time. I believe the read part, it might actually be reading from one drive instead of like the two because the data are exactly the same. But when it's being written to both of the drive, which is the reason why we're only getting just about an individual drive speed right now. Same thing on a read because it's reading from one and the data set is exactly the same. We're getting individual drive speed in this particular situation. So this is the PM normal mode, or what I call the individual drive mode, and I already have initialized both of the disks. Because they're running independently, I've actually decided to format each of these using a different file system to see how it would perform. So let's start out with the HSF Plus. Very similar to the RAID 1 speed that we're seeing before. Individual drive, a little bit over 200 megabytes per second. Nothing to really run home about or being super excited about here in terms of the read and write speed. And the read is also showing a little bit over 200 megabytes per second, around 230. So this is pretty much within the margin of error as the RAID 1. So let's stop this and see if the speed is any different when we use a drive that is APFS formatted on a hard drive. So in this situation, APFS is getting about maybe 10 megabytes per second faster, just about. And then we start to see the speed drop. So the gain is really not that much at all on APFS. So just something to realize there. When it comes to these mechanical drive, the traditional system is a little bit better. APFS, it does have a lot of virtualization and everything, but it's not really meant for these particular drive, especially if you're just using it for direct data storage. So right now this is set up as a SPAN and JBOD, and you can see that the drives are showing up as 20 terabyte. This is SPAN together because it has the same capacity, but you can see that the read and write speed right now, or at least the write, is showing up just the individual drive speed at around 230 or a little bit over 200 megabytes per second. So in a RAID 0, we're able to see north of 400 megabytes per second. We're not able to see that here, even though we do get the entire capacity of these two drives together. This is one of the modes that I say you're taking all the risks without a lot of gain. And the reason why this is happening this way is because RAID system is pretty much writing to just one of the drive first, and as soon as that drive gets filled up, then it goes to the next one. But it does not write to both of the drive at the very same time and split the data in half like in RAID 0. And this would be the read and write speed for the internal NVMe SSD that's linked on this system. You can see that for that particular drive, we're getting about 1,000 or close to 1,000 megabytes per second write, and read is coming a little bit over 870 megabytes per second. So it's a pretty good speed. However, this NVMe SSD can definitely read and write at a much higher speed. It's just being capped by the bandwidth of this particular system a little bit. So you don't necessarily need to get the fastest NVMe SSD to put into these particular docks. So now that we've finished with those, what I like to do is switch this over to an SSD. I'm just going to simply turn this off. So one thing that I noticed during the installation or swapped over from the hard drive to SSD is that the SSD uses a finer screw, whereas the hard drive uses a coarser screw thread. Now, Yottamaster include both of these in a singular bag, and this is something to note when you're doing this yourself, is that use a finer screw on the SSD and a coarser screw on the hard drive. But I really wish Yottamaster would just label them and put them in a separate bag. It'll make it a lot easier for all of us to really go and use the system. And when you put this in, you have to be extremely careful to orient the SSD in the correct location or in the correct direction so that it would plug into the SATA port, because if you do it the wrong way, unlike the hard drive, this would almost go in, but this does stick up a little bit, but nonetheless, it won't go into the system completely because it cannot be plugged into the SATA port. All right, so now that we have the SSD in, let's set this all up and let's start with RAID 0. All right, so I have this initialized on the system. This is pretty much running as a RAID 0 on APFS. Let's see the speed performance. So when we're using an SSD, I'm able to get a write speed of around 750 megabytes per second. The read around a little bit over 700. Now, can these drive technically be faster? Yes. So it's being limited by the hardware RAID that's built into this a little bit. So we're not able to fully go in and tap the full performance of the drive. But nonetheless, this is a pretty good speed, especially if you're looking for something that is non-moving part and is going to be fairly quiet. This is using RAID 1, so it is mirroring each other. And let's see what speed we're getting. So with this, we're just getting the individual SSD drive speed. So the write is 450, or just about 440. It does drop a little bit. And the read, we're probably going to get above 400, around 450, close to 460 megabytes per second. So this is the individual drive speed that we can expect from a RAID 1 mirrored. So for this particular test, you can see that in this utility, it does see both of the drive at 1 terabyte, but I'm simply only going to just initialize one. And we're getting individual drive speed again. So the write is around 440. Read's going to be about a little bit above 400, close to 460, something that we have been getting before. So these are just running them as individual drive. Now, the thing to note about it when you set this into PM normal mode or individual drive mode is that there's no correlation in the computer whatsoever, whether this is a drive in bay 1 or bay 2. So it's something that you need to really figure out if you're trying to eject one or the other. One way to test this out would probably be to plug in to drive of different capacities so you can really find that out. And this is our last test, span JBOD, using two 1 terabyte SSDs. So it's combining it together, but you can see right now that the read and also the write speed is only going to be based on one individual drive, because in this particular mode, it only fills one drive up at a time. So it's really utilizing only that. So you're using both of those drives in one singular span, but you're not really getting the advantage of having the speed of both drives running together. That's the first thing. And secondly, if one of those drives should fail, that span is entirely broken. But nonetheless, when you're using a system like this, I highly recommend having a great backup system going. Now we can see right now that the write and read speed is a little bit slightly better than the individual drive by about like 20 megabytes per second, but it's not really significantly better than the rest. When it comes to the read, it is pretty much about the same, 455, 460, so that's kind of where we are. So now that I have extensively tested out this dock, what are my thoughts about them? I think there are certain construction parts that could be improved, some of the things that would make it a little bit easier for users, but overall, I think this is a really great dock. And this can really expand the gamut and workflow from someone starting out, a casual user, students, enthusiasts that might have a little bit more files. And for certain pros, this can be something that works really well too, because you can put in really large drives in here and also really have fast and low latency storage on these NVMe's, including a large storage pool that is attached to it. And one of the big things, if you're a creative such as a photographer and you're using, for example, like Lightroom Classic, the catalog needs to be run on a device or on a storage device that is directly attached to your machine. It doesn't run, you know, on any type of NAS connection and so forth. This would be a fantastic solution for those. So I think this has a lot of avenue for creative storage uses, and the speed of it, even though it is a USB Type-C 10 gigabit connection, it is about the same speed that you would get from a NAS with a 10 gigabit connection. The only difference is that NAS is really meant for sharing. So if you have multiple computers or multiple users in your studio workspace and so forth, they can access those files at the same time, whereas this, it has to be attached to one computer. Can other people on the same network access this? Yes, you can certainly set up as a shared drive and so forth. It can do that, but you know, it might not be necessarily the best solution to do so. Now, the way how they have created this is really meant to conform with a Mac Mini, but this will work with any type of computer really. Mac PC, you just saw me doing testing on a laptop, and if you set the file system correctly, it can just run pretty much platform and also computer agnostic, which is really amazing. Lastly, the one big thing about this dock that I like is the hardware RAID that they have built in. You don't have to install any kernel extension or any software to have this run, meaning that, let's say if this is connected to one computer or connected to one of the computers and that computer happens to crash, you can simply just take it out, plug it into another computer, and it will just mount right away without any issues whatsoever, without you having to go and install any extra set of software. So I think this is a really good NAS in that regard. Anyway, I hope that you find this review of this particular dock helpful. Give this a like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you're new. I'm Art, and I thank you for your time.